Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guide. In this episode of Playas Guide, I'm going to be discussing the future of video game collecting. So here's the thing. Video game collecting has become a popular hobby, just like many other things that people collect: toys, comics, sports memorabilia, stamps, coins, whatever. It's out there. People are playing games. Video games are at the forefront of our media in the year 2020 and moving forward. Well, people know a little bit more about games and they know that they are valuable. And it's so easy to look up the price of a game on eBay or one of these sites like price charting. So it's harder and harder to find deals at flea markets, especially, and yard sales too, even if you're out looking and hunting. But that's not the only aspect of collecting. There's a lot of companies making limited productions of games that would not otherwise get a physical release. Or maybe they're making a special collector's edition or a limited edition or a complete edition, whatever the edition is. These things are all geared towards collecting. Now, if you look back at the golden age and the platinum age of video games, they weren't doing that. The games came out, and if there was a variant, it wasn't meant to be collected. We didn't see this until later on when things started coming out on the N64, like the gold, not holographic, but like, I guess holographic label cartridge. And then there was, some stuff on the PS1 and PS2. And onward, and more collectors are being targeted, with different statues and figures and stuff, and it's not going to stop. We're going to see more of that. However, we know that's the future, the immediate future, but the long-term future, what's going to happen as these companies shift the current or upcoming generations of consoles to digital only. Now, these companies that are making these short print runs of games so that people can buy them physically, their favorite indie game or whatever, or they just like collecting them, what are they going to do? So, on the Playas Guide podcast, which you should go over to Podbean and listen to if you are not already a listener of ours, we talked a little bit about this in an episode already, but we think that they might start getting into some of the older homebrew games for older consoles because they're still able to appeal to that limited physical market and sort of that indie scene as well. So it's a good alternative for them, but it's going to be a hard one to get into because they're really going to have to impress people. Now, we've seen Limited Run has done this already. They came out with a game called Golf, which I believe is a golf game. I'm not too familiar with that one. And then there was the Jay and Silent Bob Mall Brawl, which actually ended up getting released on digital platforms before the physical. So I know some people were disappointed with that. So we'll see moving forward. I don't think that they're going to stop there. Maybe this is just something to learn from, and they'll keep making these homebrew games. The Mall Brawl I haven't played yet, but it certainly does look like a good quality game. But we're also seeing homebrewers make their games on Kickstarter as well. So there's that. There's that option. I think the homebrews will always be around to collect physically. Now, that means that video games are a lot different than toys or comics in that respect, because comics, although they've tried to digitize comics, they still have a physical print every month of your favorite comic, and they'll have special guest writers and different things. Comics are still very much a big thing and collectible and readable and tangible, and toys are always going to be that way, because I guess a digital toy would be a video game. So it's definitely a little different. So what we might see is more paraphernalia from games and fanfare, things like this that people can set up and display in their game room, either an art or a model or something along those lines. I can see that stuff still selling. Now, for the retro market, I talked a little bit about the platinum and golden age, which people don't really refer to gaming as, because we're not quite there yet. We're not quite at the point where we can really well establish what generation is a platinum or gold or silver or bronze, because, games are still coming out physically, even though there's a big push from the major players in the game to come out with these digital only games. But we still got physical, so that's not quite being established. But you can see where I'm going with the NES and the Atari, and Coleco and Master System, and maybe even Super Nintendo might fit in there. That's definitely that generation, or will be. So I do think that games that are getting slabbed and graded will hold their value or go up. Not immediately, though. I think right now, or for the past 2 years, it was quite popular for people to do this. I think it is going to set a new standard of collecting, because there is only so much to go around, even for a physical loose cartridge. And that's why, you don't see, stacks of NES games at yard sales. I don't see them anymore. You probably don't see them that often. You're probably seeing like Wii or something like that, because of the time and the generations of gaming and gamers that have gone on, and the amount of collectors out there have kind of scooped up everything that's out there, or people are holding on to that stuff because they're seeing the value and that these games are collectible now, and selling them on eBay or elsewhere. But you still can get lucky. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but there's only so much supply, and there's pretty big demand for this stuff. Now, I think the demand will go down, and it'll also go down for a lot of these graded games in the near future. But in the long run, you got to look at it almost like an investment. There's going to be peaks and valleys, and right now we're sort of at a high. I think we came off of a peak recently, and we're going to slowly go down a bit, but not too far down, just a little slope, and then prices might stabilize for a while, and then they're going to start to climb again, and then they'll probably go down a bit and plateau. But over time, a lot of these sealed graded games will go up in value, because they're, in theory, with the exception of a few games like Kirby on the NES or F-Zero on the Super Nintendo, and some of the other more popular titles like the Marios and the Donkey Kong countries, which we know there's a lot of those out there sealed. They probably won't go up in value as fast. A lot of the true rares will probably spike before those games do, but they will over time go up, because like I said, supply and demand, there's only so much to go around. Now the demand is where things might slope a bit, because I don't think that there is that big of a demand for the graded games. There is currently, but I can't see that sustaining itself indefinitely. It has to cool off a bit in order for it to continue to climb. Otherwise, it's going to take a nosedive. But I mean, the same could be said for if you're just collecting loose cartridge or CIB. Condition is going to matter more and more for your collection, in terms of value, and in terms of in the eyes of other collectors. And as the stuff becomes more scarce, obviously the more pristine or complete copies are going to become more and more scarce. So if you're looking to get into video game collecting and a lot of things are becoming digital, you're going to have to look to a lot of the older games, and that's where I think stuff like the NES and the SNES really stand out as some of the outliers in collecting. So that's what I think of the future of video game collecting. I mean, there's going to be digital collectors too, and there might become some cases with a code in them for you to collect once the optical disc drive is gone. There's probably also going to be some clone consoles coming out with their own games. I know this is already happening a little bit. I don't know that those will take off so well. I think that the tried and true thing to collect for is some older generations and getting your games in as good a shape as you can or as complete as you can, because that will matter in the long run as there's less and less to go around. And people are not necessarily always going to want to relive nostalgia. That factor will die off, but people got the collecting bug, you know, they come in all ages, shapes, sizes, and forms from all over the world. And I think that there will always be video game collectors. What are your thoughts on the future of video game collecting? And I'm not just talking about retro. Was there something I should have touched upon that I didn't? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for subscribing to Playas Guide. And please don't forget to check out Playas Guide on Twitch. Playas Guide is also on Twitter and Instagram. And we have that podcast too that I mentioned up on Podbean. That's it for this episode of Playas Guide. Later, Playas.